First of all, when it comes to paint colors, white isn't white. I'm not always going to tell you which colors you should use. In fact, just last week we put out a video about the 5 off-white paint colors that I try not to recommend as trim paint. It was a bit tense, a little bit outside of my comfort zone. So today we're going to come right back to the land of positivity and go through 5 off-white paint colors that I enjoy. If you like good paint vibes, then do me a favor and click that like button really quick because it's very helpful. Behr Paint is a massive paint company that is exclusively available at the Home Depot. And I know a lot of you are familiar with them and their products and their colors. But if you're newer to paint and you're not too sure what chroma, hue, or light reflectance value means, to you, maybe it's not worth getting into that nitty-gritty detail and the differences of the plethora of white paint colors that exist. So my goal here is to simplify things just a bit, giving you 5 different white paint colors that you can use on your trim in different circumstances. And also for all my Paint People subscribers watching that are perhaps a little more advanced, I'll still give you quick breakdowns of what to expect with each one. So before we get into these colors, just a few quick little disclaimers. First of all, when it comes to paint colors, white isn't white. To me, every white paint color is technically more of an off-white with varying undertones and levels of depth. So it's a good idea to be cognizant of what kind of off-white you're getting and which one you're looking for. You can go a bit lighter, a little bit darker, warmer, cooler. There's even different kinds of warmth and coolness. It's a lot. So why don't we start with the aptly named color called off-white. It's an off-white that is quite literally an off-white. This one ties for the darkest off-white on this list with an LRV of 76. Your LRV is the color's light reflectance value, and that's a number between 0 and 100, depicting the percentage of light that the color reflects. As a color's LRV gets closer to 100, they become closer and closer to a pure bright white. So, we know off-white is truly an off-white, but what does that mean? Well, to me, it's actually a bit closer to a light grayish color, one that seems to be a lighter combination of gray and yellow, making it a warm neutral. When you use this color on the trim specifically, it'll still feel fairly light, but not necessarily white. So use it in conjunction with perhaps darker wall colors that allow a good amount of contrast, or if you're using a warmer mid-tone color as a corresponding wall color, something like off-white on the trim will do a good job at creating a more subtle look to your trim. Some people don't want that bright, vibrant neon white on their baseboards and their doors and windows. Sometimes you just want a softer look, and off-white can accomplish that really well. Now, what if you wanted that sort of look, but perhaps with less yellow, less warmth, and something that was perhaps more of a soft gray rather than a grayish? We have one of my favorite light grays to use in general, and it's called Painter's White. Yeah, you heard me correctly. I called Painter's White a gray color, and that's because it has an LRV of 76, making it a light color rather than an off-white per se. It's still an excellent color overall, and perhaps has a tad more versatility than the previously mentioned off-white because it doesn't rely so much on a yellow undertone, which may feel a bit too complementary with cooler corresponding colors. Just remember, quick note here, your wall colors in your trim should have some sort of relationship because they're paired alongside one another. If they're both warmer leaning, they'll work nicely together. If one is warmer and the other is cooler, you'll have some visual contrast or more of a complementary pairing, which could look good stylistically, but it's sometimes trickier to pull off for most people. Painter's White is generally a safer bet because of the fact that it's even more neutral, where its gray has a touch of warmth to it to keep it from feeling icy cold. Now, what if you were a fan of something along these lines that was warmer, but not necessarily beige or yellow lean? There's a really popular neutral by Behr Paint called Shoelace, and it's just a tad lighter than the last 2 colors with an LRV of 78. So you get that 2-point bump. But instead of being a grayish or a gray, Shoelace looks more like a very light taupe because of its combination of gray and brown with a slight red undertone. This is a great trim color choice if you're a fan of using a lot of earthy tones, including grays, taupes of course, browns, even terracottas and greens. It feels like a really grounded color, and even though it's a bit lighter, I still wouldn't call it a true off-white, so don't expect it to feel white on your baseboards, especially if your walls are lighter as well. For the second last color, we have a premier off-white, and this one feels to me like a true off-white. It has an LRV of 84, which puts it above that 80-point threshold that I have arbitrarily set for myself. And it has a very pleasant amount of creamy warmth to it that is very reflected in its name. It's called Swiss Coffee. And yes, for all my Benjamin Moore fans watching, it does share a lot of similarities to Benjamin Moore Swiss Coffee. The color has a balanced yellow warmth that is warm, cozy, but still somehow fresh. I would say this one does come across as a warm white on the trim, although its warmth is pretty noticeable. You will perceive that it's not a pure sterile white, but I always mention that that's not necessarily the look you always want to go for either. If you know you want to bring in some warmth, especially on your cabinets or something, or even continued onto your walls in certain cases, Swiss Coffee remains one of my better recommendations. Some of my recommendations are good, but others are better. That leaves me with my easiest recommendation for a trim color. It's not necessarily the brightest white. I believe that distinction goes to ultra pure white in the Behr catalog, which is one of, if not the highest LRV white Behr paint makes. I think so, at least. But this white that we're talking about, to me, is one of the nicest compromises of a clean, stark white that is made a little more accessible with its added cozy warmth. Not necessarily going to be perfect in every situation, but I find myself recommending it more and more for most people because it seems to tick a lot of boxes. I'm of course talking about the aptly named Polar Bear, spelled B-E-A-R, not B-E-H-R. Missed opportunity there, Bear. Come on. My intention here is just to give you some options. If you had no idea where to start with your trim colors, I hope one of these at least gets the ball rolling for you. We got more videos coming right up, so stay locked in.